The Hells Angels biker heard the little girl cry from under a capsized canoe, and what he did next terrified every onlooker. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The crisp air hung heavy over the quiet river as the sound of a capsized canoe echoed across the water. A girl's frantic cries pierced the stillness of the afternoon, her voice trembling with terror. From a distance, the rumble of a Harley-Davidson broke through the silence. Jake Morrison, a member of the Hells Angels, had been cruising down the winding road that ran parallel to the river, lost in his own thoughts. But when the cries reached his ears, everything else faded away. His eyes snapped toward the riverbank, and without a second thought, he swerved his bike toward the sound. The wind whipped past him as he made his way down the narrow trail to the river. His heart raced in his chest, but there was no time to waste. As he reached the water's edge, he spotted her, an 8-year-old girl trapped beneath the wreckage of the canoe, her small body struggling against the current. Her face was barely visible, her eyes wide with fear, and her arms flailing desperately. "Help! Help me!" she screamed, her voice barely rising above the sound of the rushing water. Without hesitation, Jake dismounted his bike and sprinted toward the water. His leather jacket flapped in the wind as he ran, the Hells Angels patches on his back seeming to weigh him down. He was used to danger, to living on the edge, but this was different. This was a child. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. Jake dove into the cold water, the current instantly pulling at him as he made his way toward the canoe. The girl was kicking wildly, her cries echoing in his ears. He reached her just in time, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her free from the wreckage. "I've got you," he said, his voice gruff but steady, as he held her close to his chest. The girl trembled in his arms, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Don't worry, you're safe now," Jake reassured her, though the doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. He could feel her body shivering against his, the cold water seeping into his bones, but he wasn't going to let go. As he swam back toward the shore, the girl's small fingers clung tightly to his jacket. Her grip was weak, but it was enough. When they finally reached solid ground, Jake pulled her from the water and laid her down on the grass. He quickly checked for injuries, relieved to find that, apart from some bruises, she seemed unharmed. But then he noticed something that sent a chill through him. The girl wasn't alone. Her mother's canoe was still floating nearby, but there was no sign of the woman. Panic gripped Jake's chest as he scanned the river. Had the woman been swept away? Was she still out there? He quickly reached for his phone and called for help, his voice shaky as he relayed the situation to emergency responders. But as he hung up, his mind raced. What had happened to the girl's mother? And how could he have been the one to find her in time, but not the woman who had been with her? The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, but Jake didn't wait. He couldn't. He had to know what happened next. He turned to the girl, his heart heavy with guilt and uncertainty. "Stay here," he said softly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll be right back." But as he took a step toward the river once more, he knew that this was only the beginning. And the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. I watched the girl's trembling body as she huddled against the damp grass, still shivering from the cold water. Jake's heart was heavy with guilt. He had saved her, but her mother was still out there, somewhere in that vast, unforgiving river. His fingers brushed through his hair, trying to think, trying to focus. The sirens grew louder, getting closer, but his mind was elsewhere. "Stay with me, kid. The professionals are coming," he said, but it felt hollow. He glanced back toward the river, his instincts pulling him toward it, even though every rational part of his mind screamed that it was too dangerous. There was no time to waste. He couldn't just stand there and wait for someone else to do what he should have done from the start. The girl's big eyes were locked on him, filled with uncertainty, but her grip on his jacket tightened. She was scared. Of course, she was. She had been through hell. But in that moment, Jake made a decision. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. "What's your name?" Jake asked, kneeling down beside her. The girl's voice was weak, but it was enough. Lily, she whispered. Lily. The name echoed in Jake's mind. His fingers tightened around his phone as he dialed the emergency number again, asking for more help. As he waited for the operator, his thoughts drifted. He had to go back in, he knew that much. He had to find the girl's mother. She was out there somewhere. The wind had picked up, the water now swirling even more aggressively, but Jake wasn't about to let the river claim another victim. Not on his watch. The operator's voice broke his thoughts. We've dispatched a team, sir. Stay with the child. Help is on the way. But Jake wasn't staying put. He couldn't. The guilt was suffocating him. What if he had made it to her sooner? What if the woman was still out there, in need of help, and he was the only one who could save her? He turned toward Lily, who was looking up at him with an expression he couldn't quite place. Fear? Hope? Or was it a plea for answers? I'll be back, he promised her, his voice firm yet soft, trying to calm his own racing thoughts. As he moved toward the water, the feeling of the cold, biting current wrapping around his legs was almost a relief. The numbness helped block out the guilt. He focused on the task ahead. Lily's mother was out there, somewhere between the twisted trees and the rushing water, and he couldn't let her slip away like so many others had in his past. The river roared as Jake waded deeper into the water, the cold seeping through his clothes, but he barely noticed. His eyes scanned the shore, then the water, desperate for any sign. His mind raced. How had the woman been thrown from the canoe? Was she injured? How long had she been floating out there alone? The frantic thoughts swirled in his mind like the water around him. He was halfway across when he heard a faint sound, just a whisper against the wind. It wasn't Lily's voice, but someone else's. He froze, listening. Another cry, barely audible, coming from the far side of the river. His heart skipped a beat. I'm coming, Jake shouted, his voice echoing against the wind, and he pushed harder against the current. He wasn't sure how long he had been in the water, how far he had traveled, but he finally spotted something. A shape, half submerged, tangled in the branches of a tree. It was her. The woman. Lily's mother. Jake's heart slammed in his chest as he rushed toward her, grabbing her arm and pulling her free from the tree's grasp. Her body was limp, her face pale, but she was alive. He pulled her close, hearing her faint, shallow breaths. You're okay, he murmured, though the words felt empty. He had to get her out of the water. He had to save her. The woman's eyes fluttered open as Jake began dragging her back toward the shore. Her gaze met his for a brief moment, full of confusion. Lily, she whispered weakly. Where is she? Jake didn't have the words. He couldn't answer her. She's safe. She's waiting for you, he finally said, trying to keep his voice steady. The river had claimed so much from him in the past, but it wasn't going to take this woman too. Not this time. As they reached the shore, Jake looked back toward Lily, who had been watching from the grass. Her eyes locked with his, and he gave her a small nod of reassurance. She was safe, and so was her mother, at least for now. Jake laid the woman down gently, checking her for any injuries as the emergency team arrived. His heart still pounded in his chest, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something more than the cold numbness that had been his constant companion. He had saved them. He had made a difference. I stood over the riverbank, my hands shaking from the cold, but also from the weight of what I had just done. The woman, Lily's mother, was still unconscious, but she was breathing, and that was all that mattered. The sound of sirens grew louder as the paramedics arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. I knew I had done everything I could, but I couldn't help but feel that the river had won somehow. It always did. I turned back toward the girl, Lily, sitting quietly on the grass, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked so small, so fragile, alone in the world. Her eyes met mine, full of uncertainty and fear, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just fear. It was as if she was waiting for something more from me, something that I wasn't sure I had left to give. Is she going to be okay? Lily's voice broke the silence, soft and hesitant. I gave her a small smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. She's going to be fine, I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure. The river had claimed so many before her. You did good, I added, walking over to her and sitting down beside her. I wasn't sure if she understood what I meant, but her eyes softened just a bit. I could tell she was still processing everything, the events of the day still swirling in her head. The ambulance pulled up to the bank, and the paramedics jumped out, ready to take over. They rushed to the woman first, checking her vitals, putting her on a stretcher, and making sure she was stable. But I couldn't just stand there and watch. I had to know more. I had to know what had happened to Lily's family, how they had ended up here. Lily, I said, turning back to her. Do you want to tell me what happened? She looked at me, her eyes wide, as if she was still unsure whether she could trust me. After a long moment, she nodded. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. Mom, she was just trying to take me down the river to see the old campsite. We used to go there when I was little. But her voice trailed off, and she looked down at the ground. I could tell she was struggling to find the words, the memories still too raw. I sat quietly beside her, waiting. The words would come when she was ready. The canoe, it tipped over, she continued, her eyes welling up with tears. I don't know what happened. We were both in the water, and I couldn't see her. I don't know if she got hurt, or if she just went under. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to fall. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. I couldn't find her. I thought she was gone. And then I heard you, and her voice broke, and the tears spilled over. I didn't know what to say. I had saved her mother, but the question still loomed in the air. Had I really saved her? Had I done enough? I placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her in the only way I knew how. You did good, I said again, my voice thick with emotion. You're safe now, and she's going to be all right. But even as I said it, I didn't know if I believed it. The ambulance started moving the woman toward the vehicle, and I knew it was time to go. The paramedics had it from here. But Lily, she needed more than just safety. She needed answers, and I wasn't sure I had them. Where are you going? Lily asked suddenly, her voice quiet. I looked down at her, surprised by the question. I'm going to make sure your mom gets the help she needs, I said, standing up. But I'll be back. I promise. I'll make sure you're okay too. She nodded, her small face full of uncertainty. I could see that she wasn't fully convinced, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes now. That was something, at least. As I walked toward the paramedics, I felt a weight in my chest that wasn't just from the exhaustion of the day. It was the weight of knowing that there was more to this story, more than I had seen on the surface. Lily's family had been through something, and I couldn't just walk away from it. Not now. I didn't know what I was getting into, but something inside me told me I had to see it through. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something else, something that felt like purpose. The sirens faded in the distance, but I stayed standing by the river for a few moments longer, the sounds of the rushing water filling my ears. It felt like the river was telling me something that I couldn't quite understand yet. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked along the edge of the river, the cool night air biting at my skin, but I barely noticed it. My mind was elsewhere, on Lily and her mother. I had promised her I'd come back, and I intended to keep that promise. The sounds of the ambulance fading into the distance were replaced by the steady rushing of the river, a constant reminder of how fragile everything felt. I hadn't had a chance to fully process what had happened. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I couldn't shake. Lily had looked at me like I was some kind of savior. But who was I really? A man on a motorcycle who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time? Or someone who had finally found a reason to stop running from his past? I didn't know the answer yet, but I had to find out. I reached my bike, its engine still warm from earlier. The wheels seemed to hum under my fingers as I gripped the handlebars, the power of the machine a comforting reminder that I wasn't entirely powerless. I had a plan. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. The hospital where they'd taken Lily's mother wasn't far. It was the only real option I had. I couldn't let this go unanswered. The woman, the mother, she needed help. Lily needed answers. And for some reason, I felt like I was the one who had to find them. The ride was faster than I expected, but that was the only thing that seemed to matter in that moment. I pulled into the parking lot of the small community hospital and killed the engine. The place was quiet, too quiet for the kind of night it had been. I walked in through the double doors, the smell of antiseptic and coffee hanging in the air. A nurse at the front desk looked up at me as I approached. Her face softened a little when she saw me. Maybe it was the look of a man who had been through something. Maybe it was something else. I wasn't sure. Can I help you? She asked, her voice calm. I'm looking for a woman, Lily's mother. She was brought in earlier, I said, my voice rough, still carrying the remnants of the cold air outside. I need to talk to her. Or at least find out how she's doing. The nurse checked her computer screen, typing something in. You're a relative? She asked. I hesitated for a moment. Was I? Technically no. But I had saved her life. So in some ways, that had to count for something, right? Something like that. I muttered. She looked at me for a beat before nodding. Room 3, down the hall to your right. But you'll have to wait for the doctor to clear her first. I nodded and headed down the hallway, my boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Room 3. I reached it and stood outside for a moment, just watching the door. What was I supposed to say to this woman? What could I say? I wasn't a therapist or a counselor. Hell, I wasn't even sure what I was doing here. But I had to be. I couldn't walk away from this. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Lily's mother was lying in a hospital bed, the steady beep of the heart monitor filling the silence. She looked so fragile, so different from the woman I had seen earlier, fighting the river to stay alive. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was slow, but steady. I took a deep breath and walked closer. I didn't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't this sense of guilt that weighed down on me. I had saved her, yes, but at what cost? What did she think of me? Of what had happened? What did Lily think? Was she grateful, or was she terrified of the man who had pulled her mother from the water? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake off the thoughts that were clouding my mind. She'll be okay, right? I asked, though I wasn't sure if I was asking the nurse or myself. The nurse, who had followed me in, gave a small nod. Yes, she should be fine. She just needs rest and fluids. The shock was hard on her, but she's a fighter. I nodded, feeling some of the weight lift off my chest, but only a little. I needed to talk to her. I needed to know how this happened, why they had been out there, why they were in danger. I wanted to know everything. I turned back to the nurse. When can I talk to her? I asked. She's still unconscious for now, but she should wake up in the next few hours. If you want, you can wait here. I didn't know how long I would be able to wait, but I wasn't about to leave. Not now. Not when there were still so many questions unanswered. I pulled up a chair beside the bed and sat down. The night stretched on, the silence of the room only interrupted by the soft beeping of the heart monitor and the sound of my own thoughts. I couldn't help but think of Lily, of the look in her eyes when she had looked at me, the hope mixed with fear. She was so young, so innocent. She didn't deserve any of this. I felt a pull in my chest, an urge to protect them both. But how? How could I help them when I didn't even know what had happened? The wait seemed to stretch on forever, but I didn't mind. I was here for them. I had to be. And when Lily's mother woke up, I would finally get the answers I needed. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. I sat there, waiting for the hours to pass, the sterile quiet of the hospital room surrounding me. The only sound was the soft, steady beeping of the heart monitor beside Lily's mother. The questions in my mind were relentless, but there was nothing I could do but wait for her to wake up. The weight of what had happened, what I had seen, and the promises I had made, kept pressing on me. I kept my eyes fixed on her, my mind racing through every possible scenario. I had to know what happened out there. I had to know why they were on the river in the first place, and why Lily's mother had ended up in the water. It wasn't just about saving them. It was about understanding what had gone wrong. What had happened that led to this moment? I stood up and paced the small room, my boots tapping softly against the floor. My mind kept drifting back to the river, to the way the water had pulled at everything around me. It had nearly taken her. It had nearly taken both of them. I thought about the night, how cold it had been, how the air had felt thick, almost suffocating with the weight of uncertainty. I had promised Lily I would come back. I didn't know what that promise meant yet. Was I supposed to be her protector now? Her family? The thought of it made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure I was even the right person for that. The door to the room creaked open, and a nurse stepped inside, breaking my thoughts. She's awake, the nurse said with a smile. The doctor will be in soon to check her, but she's alert. I felt a rush of relief, quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I nodded, trying to hide the nervousness in my voice. Thank you, I said. As the nurse stepped out, I turned back to Lily's mother. She was awake now, her eyes fluttering open. Her gaze was unfocused at first, but then, slowly, it sharpened. She looked at me, confusion evident on her face, and then her eyes shifted to the window, as if trying to piece everything together. She opened her mouth, but her voice was weak, barely a whisper. Where am I? She croaked. I moved closer, my hand instinctively reaching out to offer comfort. "You're safe now," I said gently. "You were in an accident, but you're in the hospital. You're going to be okay." She blinked slowly, the reality of the situation sinking in. Her eyes met mine again, full of confusion and something else, fear. "Lily," she whispered. "Is she okay?" My heart clenched, and I nodded. "She's fine. She's safe. She's been asking about you." The relief that passed over her face was immediate, but it quickly shifted to something more intense. She tried to sit up, but winced, clearly still in pain. "I need to see her," she said, her voice desperate. I placed a hand on her arm, gently urging her to stay still. "You need to rest first," I said, though I understood the urgency in her voice. "I'll make sure you see her soon. Just give yourself some time to recover." She nodded weakly, sinking back into the bed with a sigh. For a moment, the room was silent, just the steady beeping of the heart monitor filling the air. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. She had been through so much, and here I was, a stranger, the one who had pulled her from the water. What kind of man was I? I wasn't her family. I wasn't supposed to be here, and yet, I couldn't seem to walk away. As the silence stretched on, Lily's mother closed her eyes again, her brow furrowed as if she was lost in thought. I could see the exhaustion in her face. The battle had clearly taken everything out of her, but the worry on her face was even stronger. She had been through a hell of a lot, and I knew the road to recovery, physically and emotionally, was going to be long. A few minutes passed before she spoke again, her voice hoarse. "What happened out there?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. I couldn't tell her the whole truth, how close we had come to losing her, how close the river had been to taking everything. But I had to say something. "The canoe capsized," I said simply. "You both fell into the water. I found you. You were unconscious, but I managed to pull you out." She nodded, still processing what I had said. Then her eyes locked with mine, and I could see the depth of the emotions swirling in them. "I couldn't save her," she whispered. "I couldn't save Lily." The pain in her voice was raw, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. I could tell she was blaming herself, just as I had blamed myself for so many things in my past. "You did save her," I said, my voice firm. "You saved her by being strong for her. You're here now, and that's all that matters." She looked at me, searching my face, as if trying to figure out if I was telling her the truth. For a moment, I wasn't sure myself. But then, something in her eyes softened, just slightly. I could see the weight lifting off her shoulders, even if it was just a little. I knew the road ahead would be tough. There would be questions, guilt, and pain. But for now, all I could do was be here, be a part of her journey toward healing. And for once, I wasn't running away. I was staying. And I wasn't sure what would come next, but I wasn't going to let them face it alone. I sat there beside her hospital bed, my eyes drifting from her to the window, where the light of the morning was just beginning to creep in, casting long shadows across the room. The night had felt endless, but now, as dawn broke, I knew it was time to talk. She had woken up, but her eyes were still distant. She wasn't fully present yet, her mind lingering on what had happened. She had tried to sit up earlier, but the pain in her body had stopped her. Now, as I watched her, I realized she wasn't just physically exhausted. She was mentally drained, carrying a burden far heavier than anything I could imagine. Lily's mother turned her head slowly toward me, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was considering whether she could trust me. I had pulled her from the river, but it felt like she was still trapped in the current, drowning in the thoughts she hadn't yet processed. Her voice broke the silence. "What happened to her?" she asked, her voice fragile, hoarse from the ordeal. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's okay. She's with a social worker right now, and she's safe," I said, though the words felt inadequate. Lily had been through so much, and I couldn't even begin to understand how much this situation had affected her. "Is she angry?" Her voice cracked again, her eyes filling with tears. "She should be angry at me. I couldn't protect her." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never seen her like this, broken, vulnerable. The woman who had been so strong in the face of danger, now questioning her every decision. I stood up, walking over to the window for a moment. The sunlight was now flooding into the room, and it felt like a cruel reminder of how everything had changed. The world kept turning outside, but inside this small hospital room, everything felt frozen. "You saved her," I said, turning back toward her. You kept her alive. That's what matters. She closed her eyes, her face scrunching in. Pain as the weight of the situation sank deeper into her bones. I don't know if I believe that, she whispered. I should have done something more. I should have been stronger for her. I walked back over to her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Lily will need time, just like you, I said softly. What happened out there was beyond anyone's control. But you both made it through, and that's what matters right now. You're here. You're alive. She's alive. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The reality of the situation was settling in, and it was clear she was grappling with guilt, something I knew too well. The voices in her head telling her she could have done more, that she should have been better. I could see it in her eyes, the self-blame that so often came after trauma. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch out. The weight of the conversation hung between us, and for a moment, there was nothing more to say. I wasn't sure how long we sat there, but eventually, she spoke again. You know, I don't even remember how we got on the river. We were just going to visit the old campsite. I didn't think anything could go wrong. But when the canoe flipped, I couldn't find her. The water pulled us in different directions, and all I could think was that I was going to lose her, she said, her voice breaking. I nodded, understanding the helplessness she must have felt in that moment. It was something I had seen countless times before, people struggling against things far bigger than themselves. It wasn't your fault, I said, trying to reassure her. The river doesn't care. It takes without warning, without mercy. But you fought. You fought to stay alive, and so did she. She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the sides of the bed as if she were holding on to something she couldn't let go of. But I didn't save her. I didn't keep her safe. Her voice was small now, almost a whisper. I could see how deeply this was eating at her, how much this was tearing her apart. Lily needs you. She needs you to be strong for her now, I said, hoping my words would sink in. She needs you more than ever, and you can't afford to fall apart. Not now, she nodded slowly, her expression softening as the realization hit her. I could see the glimmer of something new in her eyes, determination. She wasn't going to let this break her. She was going to fight, for herself and for Lily. I know you're scared, I said, my voice quiet. But you don't have to do this alone. She looked at me then, her gaze steady, and for the first time since I had met her, I saw strength in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what I would have done without you. I nodded, but in truth, I didn't need her gratitude. I wasn't here for that. I was here because she and Lily needed someone to stand by them, and I had made a promise. A promise I was going to keep. The door to the room opened again, and the doctor stepped in, followed by a nurse with a clipboard. How are we feeling today? The doctor asked, giving a friendly smile as he adjusted his glasses. She nodded weakly but gave him a small smile in return. Better, she said quietly. The doctor's smile faded slightly as he looked at her condition and began asking his questions, checking her vitals. As he spoke, I stood up and stepped toward the door, giving her some privacy. But before I left, I turned back toward her. You're doing great, I said. You're not alone in this. She gave me a tired but grateful look, and I walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me. Outside in the hallway, I leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. I had done what I could, but now it was time for Lily's mother to start healing, to start rebuilding. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew this much. Whatever came next, I would be there. And I wasn't going anywhere. I left the hospital room, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above the hallway adding to the stillness of the early morning. My boots echoed against the tiles as I made my way outside. The cold air hit me immediately, a stark contrast to the warmth inside the hospital. I took a deep breath, letting the crispness of it fill my lungs. I needed to clear my mind. The weight of what had happened, the river, Lily, her mother, was still sitting heavily on my chest. I had pulled them both out of the water, but now the real work began. They needed more than just a rescue. They needed a future. I ran my fingers through my hair and reached for my phone. I had to check in on Lily. I hadn't seen her since the hospital staff took her away from the room where I had left her with the social worker. I knew she was scared, maybe even confused, and I felt the pull to make sure she was okay. I had promised her I would come back, but I wasn't sure how much of that promise I could keep. I was a stranger to her, just the man who had found her mother in the water. Still, there was something in me that refused to let them go through this alone. I sent a quick text to the social worker assigned to her. How's Lily? Is she okay? I hit send and waited. The silence of the early morning seemed to stretch endlessly, the weight of time dragging. The reply came back faster than I expected. She's doing okay. Still a little shaken, but she's strong. She's asking about you. If you want, you can come by later. The words were brief, but comforting. She was asking about me? It felt strange. I wasn't sure if it was because she saw me as a lifeline, or if she just wanted to know if the man who had saved her mother was coming back. I stared at the phone for a moment longer, considering what to do next. There was so much I didn't understand. Why had Lily's mother been so affected by the river? Why was she so quick to blame herself? Why was Lily so quiet, so withdrawn? The questions kept piling up, one on top of the other, but I knew I couldn't find the answers by just thinking about them. I had to be there. For them both. I slid my phone back into my pocket and took another long breath, letting the wind clear my mind. I wasn't sure how this story would end, but I knew I was part of it now. Part of their journey, whether they wanted me there or not. I started the engine of my bike, the low growl of the Harley reverberating through my body. As I rode back to the hospital, the weight of my thoughts was replaced with the sound of the engine and the road stretching ahead of me. It felt like a different world now. The world of the river, of Lily and her mother, was something I couldn't quite grasp, but it was pulling me in, and there was no way I could ignore it. The hospital was only a few miles away, but by the time I arrived, the feeling of urgency had been replaced with something else, something deeper. I pulled up to the front, parked, and walked inside. The same nurse I had seen earlier was at the desk. She looked up when I approached. She's still resting, the nurse said. But you can see her if you'd like. I nodded and followed her down the familiar hallway. I didn't know what I was expecting when I entered the room, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Lily's mother was sitting up in bed, her face still pale, but the look in her eyes was different. There was something softer there now, as if the storm inside her had started to calm. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, she just stared at me. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "Thank you for saving me," she said. I didn't know what to say. The words felt so small, so inadequate in comparison to what had happened. "You don't have to thank me," I said, my voice rough. "I just did what needed to be done." She nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to the empty chair beside the bed. "Will you stay for a little while?" she asked. The question took me off guard. I had expected her to want to be alone, to rest, to process everything that had happened. But she wasn't asking for space. She was asking for connection. I didn't know what was right. I didn't know if staying was what either of us needed. But I couldn't leave her alone, not yet. I sat down in the chair, my body still tense, but my mind already shifting, adjusting to this new role I had found myself in. "How is Lily?" I asked gently. She looked down, her expression softening. "She's asking about you. She doesn't quite understand everything, but she wants to know if you're coming back." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly recovered. "She needs someone. And I need someone too." The words hung in the air between us. It was like a silent admission of something neither of us had wanted to say, but something we both knew. Lily and her mother weren't alone anymore. They had each other, but now they also had me. And that meant I couldn't walk away from this. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The room was silent for a long moment. No words were spoken, but the unspoken understanding between us was enough. I didn't have all the answers, but I had a promise to keep. And that promise was to be there, for as long as they needed me. I stood beside the hospital bed, watching Lily's mother as she lay there, her eyes still filled with the storm of emotions she had been carrying since the accident. She had been through so much, and it wasn't over yet. I could see the guilt still gnawing at her, but there was a shift in her expression now. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding. We had both been pulled from the river, but the real challenge lay ahead. Lily needed answers, and so did I. We all needed to know why this happened. "I want to thank you again," Lily's mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." I nodded, not sure how to respond. "You don't have to thank me. I did what anyone would have done," I said. But I wasn't sure if that was true. What had driven me to stay? Was it just because it was the right thing to do? Or was there something more, something I couldn't quite put my finger on? I wasn't sure. What I did know was that I wasn't walking away now. Not when they still needed me. "Lily asked about you again," she said, breaking my thoughts. "She's waiting for you, you know." My chest tightened at the mention of her name. I had promised I'd come back, but it was harder than I thought. I had become part of their story, and now I couldn't leave. The thought of walking out the door and never looking back wasn't something I could entertain. I owed them too much. I'll go see her after this, I replied softly. But you need to rest. You've been through enough. She nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, she confessed, her voice breaking. I feel like I failed her. She's been through so much already. I should have protected her. Her words hit me hard. The pain in her voice mirrored the same guilt I had carried for so long. The same feeling that I should have done more, should have been better. But it wasn't about what we could have done. It was about what we were going to do now. You didn't fail her, I said firmly, sitting down next to her. You kept her alive. And now, you're going to help her heal. That's all anyone can ask of you. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. I could see the relief in her expression, but it was only temporary. There was still so much healing to be done, so much uncertainty to face. I couldn't promise her everything would be easy, but I could promise I'd be there. I wouldn't let them go through this alone. I'll be here for you, I added, my voice low. Both of you. She gave me a small smile, the first real one I'd seen since the accident, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But I knew this was just the beginning. The hardest part was still ahead of us. I left the room and made my way down the hallway to where Lily was waiting. As I approached her, I could see she was sitting up in a chair by the window, her small frame huddled against the cold air seeping through the cracks in the window. She looked so small, so fragile, her face pale from the ordeal. She didn't notice me at first, but when she turned around, her eyes widened. You came back, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I told you I would, I replied, walking over and sitting beside her. How are you holding up? I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she just stared out the window, her eyes distant. I'm scared, she said after a long pause, her voice trembling. I don't want to be alone. The words hit me hard. I had seen the fear in her eyes before, but hearing her say it aloud made it real. She wasn't just scared for herself. She was scared for her mother too. And I had no idea how to make that fear go away. I put a hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her in the only way I knew. You're not alone, I said. I'm here. And your mom is going to be okay. You'll both be okay. She looked at me then, her eyes searching my face, looking for something, anything to hold on to. You promise? She asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded. I promise. I didn't know if I could keep that promise. I didn't know what the future held for any of us. But for now, it was all I could offer her. The room felt heavier now, the silence thick with the weight of the unspoken questions hanging between us. What was going to happen next? How were we all going to heal from this? I didn't have answers. I couldn't offer anything beyond the promise to be there. That was all I could do. That was all any of us could do. Lily's head rested on my shoulder as she finally seemed to relax, her breathing evening out as she closed her eyes. I sat there, unsure of what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. Maybe it wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was just about being there when someone needed you. And for Lily and her mother, I would be there, for as long as they needed me. I sat beside Lily, watching her as she finally seemed to settle. The room was quiet now, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. She had fallen asleep against my shoulder, her small body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been building up over the past few days. I couldn't help but feel a sense of protectiveness towards her. She had been through more than any child should ever have to endure, and yet here she was, trying to find comfort, trying to find some sense of normalcy in the chaos. It was a lot to ask of someone so young. I glanced over at Lily's mother, who was still lying in her bed, staring out the window, lost in her thoughts. I could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of everything she had been through, and I knew she wasn't ready to face the questions that would come. But I also knew she had no choice. We couldn't move forward without confronting what had happened. I stood up slowly, careful not to wake Lily, and walked over to the window. The sun was setting now, casting an orange glow over the parking lot outside. It felt like the whole world was moving on, and we were just here, stuck in this small room, waiting for the answers that none of us had. I turned back to look at Lily and her mother. They both needed time to heal, and they both needed someone to help them do that. I wasn't sure if I was that person, but I was all they had right now. A knock on the door broke my thoughts. I turned to see the social worker who had been looking after Lily standing in the doorway. "How's she doing?" she asked, glancing at Lily as she slept. "She's okay," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "She's had a lot to process, but she's doing better." The social worker nodded, then turned her attention to Lily's mother. "And her mother?" I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. "She's still struggling. She blames herself for what happened." The social worker gave a sympathetic nod. "It's normal for someone to feel that way after a traumatic event," she said. "But she needs to understand that what happened wasn't her fault. And it's important for her to talk about it when she's ready." I looked back at Lily's mother, her face drawn in concentration, her eyes still distant. "She's not ready yet," I said softly. The social worker nodded again. "Then we'll give her the time she needs. But it's important that you don't let her shut herself off. You've done a lot already by being here for her. Just keep being patient with her." I nodded, appreciating the advice. It wasn't easy. I wasn't used to dealing with people who needed help, especially not in such a personal way. But this situation was different. They were different. I couldn't just walk away from them. The social worker looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "You're doing the right thing by sticking around," she said. "It's not easy, but sometimes all someone needs is someone to be there." I let out a breath, relieved that she seemed to understand. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. She smiled faintly, then turned to leave. "I'll check in again later," she said before stepping out of the room. I stood there for a moment, watching the door close behind her. It was just me, Lily, and her mother now. The weight of the silence in the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. I didn't know how much longer we could go on like this, each of us trying to hold it together in the face of something so much bigger than ourselves. But I also knew that I couldn't walk away. Not now. I walked over to Lily's mother and sat down beside her. She didn't look at me right away, but I could see her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was trying to keep it together, trying to hold herself together, but I could tell she was close to breaking. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do I keep going? How do I make sure she's okay?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't an expert on healing, on grief, or on what it took to get through something like this. But I did know one thing. She didn't have to do it alone. "You don't have to do it alone," I said softly. She turned to look at me then, her eyes filled with so many emotions I couldn't even begin to read. "I'm here," I added. "I'm not going anywhere." She looked away again, but there was something in her gaze now, something like relief, mixed with the sorrow that still clung to her. "I don't deserve your help," she whispered. "I don't deserve anyone's help." I reached out, gently placing a hand on hers. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to accept it." There was silence again, but it wasn't quite as heavy as before. It was still a long road ahead, and I couldn't promise her everything would be okay right away. But I could promise that I would be there. And sometimes, that's all you can offer, just being there, when it feels like the world is too much to handle on your own. The room was quiet, but it didn't feel as suffocating now. There was hope, however faint, flickering between us. And for the first time since everything had started, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we would make it through this. Together. I stood there, my hand still resting on hers, feeling the tremble of her fingers as she processed what I had said. The weight of her guilt hadn't lifted, but I could see a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was Lily. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the fear and pain that had been inflicted on both of them, but I could stand by them now. That was something. That was all I could offer. We sat in silence for a while, the sound of the heart monitor a constant, soothing rhythm in the background. I could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken words hanging between us. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. It was that neither of us knew where to begin. She had her own battles to fight, and I had my own demons to deal with. But for now, we didn't need to speak. I just needed to be here. And so did she. After a long moment, she finally broke the silence. "I don't know what to do next," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I feel like I'm failing her. I don't even know how to take care of her, after everything that's happened." I shook my head gently. "You're not failing her. You're doing what you can. You're here. And that's all she needs right now." Her gaze softened slightly, but the fear in her eyes didn't disappear. She wasn't convinced. I knew it. "I can't make up for what happened," she said, almost to herself. "I can't erase the fear she must feel every time she looks at me. I should have been able to protect her. Her voice cracked, and I felt the depth of her pain. It was something I recognized all too well. The guilt that gnawed at you, that made you question everything you had done, everything you hadn't. But I couldn't let her keep carrying it alone. You're not alone in this, I said softly. You don't have to carry all of this weight by yourself. I'm here for both of you. Lily needs you, and you need to be strong for her. You can't change what's happened, but you can still shape what comes next. She turned her head slowly, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time. Her eyes were full of doubt, but there was a spark there now, a recognition that she wasn't completely on her own. It was small, but it was there. I don't know how to be strong anymore, she said quietly. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix everything, I replied. You just have to keep going. One step at a time. You'll get through this. And so will she. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling as she held back the tears that had been threatening to fall. The silence stretched on again, but this time, it wasn't as heavy. There was a sense of possibility in the air. We weren't fixed, not by a long shot, but we were taking the first steps toward healing. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. As the minutes passed, I could feel the exhaustion in the air. We had both been through so much, and it was starting to catch up with us. But there was still so much to do. Lily needed me. Lily's mother needed me. And I needed them too. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least we didn't have to face it alone. The door to the room opened slowly, and a nurse walked in with a gentle smile. She checked the monitors and adjusted the 4 before turning to us. How's everyone doing in here? She asked kindly. Lily's mother gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. We're okay, she said, her voice still shaky but a little steadier than before. I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward. The nurse nodded, taking in the situation with a professional, understanding look. It's okay to take things one day at a time, she said, her voice calm. Healing doesn't happen all at once. You've already taken the hardest step by being here and being present for your daughter. She gave me a quick glance, as if to acknowledge the role I was playing in this small moment of peace. And you're not alone in this, she added. You have support, and we'll help. You get through this. I could see that the nurse's words had an effect on Lily's mother. She seemed to relax a little, her shoulders no longer so tense. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't feel like I deserve it, but thank you. The nurse smiled warmly, then nodded. Everyone deserves help. Don't forget that. As the nurse left the room, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't a fix, but it was a step forward. The quiet that followed was less uncomfortable now. Lily's mother was still staring out the window, but I could tell she was thinking, reflecting. She was starting to realize that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward, one step at a time. Lily stirred in her sleep beside me, her small hand clutching the blanket tightly. I watched her for a moment, feeling a sense of responsibility that I hadn't expected. I had stepped into their world without knowing what to expect, but now that I was here, I wasn't going anywhere. It was going to be a long road, but I was committed to walking it with them. Whatever came next, we would face it together. I stood up quietly and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond. It felt so much bigger than the little hospital room we were in. But even in that vastness, I knew one thing for sure. We weren't alone anymore. And maybe that was the first real step toward healing. I woke up to the soft sound of the hospital room door opening. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep until I felt the warmth of sunlight creeping in through the blinds. It wasn't long after sunrise. I rubbed my eyes and stretched, feeling the familiar weight of the promise I had made. Lily and her mother needed me, and I couldn't let them down. I turned to check on Lily's mother, who had been quiet for most of the morning, lost in her thoughts. She looked over at me, her face still pale but softer than it had been when I first arrived. She had been through so much in such a short amount of time, and the burden of it was still there, though it wasn't as overwhelming as before. She caught my gaze, her eyes searching mine, and I could see the unspoken question there. Was I still going to be there for them? Was I still going to stand by them? The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't have the answers, but what I did know was that I wasn't going to walk away. Not now. Not when they needed me the most. How are you feeling? I asked softly, breaking the silence that had settled between us. She gave me a small, tired smile. I'm okay. I think I'm starting to understand that I can't fix everything in one day. I just have to take it one step at a time. Her voice was stronger than it had been before, though there was still a trace of doubt behind her words. I nodded. That's all anyone can do. One step at a time. She nodded back, her gaze drifting to the window. I just keep thinking about everything we've lost, everything that could have been different. But I know I can't keep holding on to that. I have to focus on what's ahead, not what's behind. I could see the weight of those words, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She wasn't fully healed, not by a long shot, but she was starting to find her footing again. It wasn't about fixing everything all at once. It was about moving forward, piece by piece. I sat down beside her, wanting to offer whatever comfort I could. I don't think anyone expects you to have all the answers, I said. We're all just trying to make it through, one moment at a time. And you've already done so much. You saved her. You kept her alive. She shook her head slowly, her fingers nervously gripping the sheets. But that's not enough. I feel like I should have done more. I should have protected her better. What if something happens again? The fear in her voice was palpable, and I could hear the anxiety rising in her chest. You can't control everything, I said gently. What happened out there wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known what was going to happen, but you got through it. And now, you're here, with her. And that's enough. You'll both be okay. She looked at me, her eyes searching for some kind of reassurance, and for the first time, I felt like I was giving it to her. It wasn't a perfect solution, but sometimes, that's all we can offer, our presence. She let out a long breath, her shoulders slumping with a kind of weary surrender. I don't know if I can be strong enough for her, she whispered. I don't know if I can give her what she needs. I took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth of it. You already are. Being here, being present for her, that's the most important thing. And you don't have to do it all alone. I'm here. We're all here. She gave me a weak smile, but I could see the flicker of something in her eyes. It was the smallest sign of hope, but it was enough. For the first time, I saw her starting to believe that maybe she wasn't alone in this. Maybe she could do it. Maybe they could both make it through this. I glanced over at Lily, who had woken up and was sitting up in bed, her eyes still a little groggy but wide with curiosity. She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment, the fear in her eyes seemed to disappear. Hi, she said softly. How's my mom doing? I smiled, walking over to her. She's doing better. She's strong, just like you. Lily's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but there was a hint of relief in them. She wasn't sure yet if everything would be okay, but there was a glimmer of hope in her gaze that hadn't been there before. I'm glad, she whispered. I just want everything to be okay. I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. It will be. You're both going to be okay. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just a stranger to them anymore. I wasn't just the guy who had pulled them out of the water. I was part of their story now. And as much as I feared what the future might bring, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, I was going to face it with them. Together. We would heal, one step at a time. And no matter what, I would never leave them. Not now. Not ever. I woke up the next morning to the sound of the hospital bustling outside the room. The soft beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing I heard, followed by the distant chatter of nurses and doctors in the hallway. It was still early, but the weight of the previous day lingered in my mind. The hospital room was quiet, the only movement being the slight rise and fall of Lily's mother's chest as she slept. Her face, though still pale, held a peacefulness that hadn't been there the day before. She had been through so much, but in that moment, she seemed to be finding some semblance of calm. I looked over at Lily, who was still asleep beside me, her small frame curled up in the chair. She had fallen asleep last night with her head resting on my shoulder, exhausted from everything that had happened. I couldn't imagine the weight of what she had experienced. The trauma of almost losing her mother, the fear, the uncertainty, it had all been too much for her. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, careful not to wake her. She stirred slightly, but didn't open her eyes. I stood up quietly, taking one last look at them both before stepping out into the hallway. I needed to clear my head. I needed to think. The weight of my role in all of this was beginning to settle on me. I wasn't just some passerby anymore. I had made a commitment to them, to help them through this, but it was starting to feel heavier than I expected. I wasn't sure what came next, or what I was supposed to do, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going anywhere. As I walked down the hallway, I ran into the nurse from yesterday. She gave me a small smile when she saw me. How are they doing today? She asked. I sighed, feeling the exhaustion of the past few days. They're hanging in there. I think they're both trying to find a way to move forward, but it's hard. It's all still so fresh. The nurse nodded sympathetically. It's going to take time, she said gently. But they're lucky to have someone like you here. Sometimes, just being there makes all the difference. Her words, though kind, hit me hard. I hadn't expected to be their anchor. I wasn't sure I was even the right person for that. But I couldn't back out now. I had already made my choice. I had already promised them. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted. The nurse smiled knowingly. None of us do. You just keep showing up, and that's enough. I took a deep breath, trying to accept her words. I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to be there. I thanked the nurse and walked back to the room, feeling a little lighter, though still uncertain about what was ahead. As I opened the door, I saw Lily's mother awake now, sitting up in bed with her hand resting on her lap. She looked up at me and gave me a small, tired smile. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, I replied, walking over to her. How are you feeling? She took a deep breath and gave a slight shrug. I'm okay. Still a little shaken, but I'm alive. That's all that matters. Her words were simple, but there was a strength in them that hadn't been there before. She was starting to come to terms with what had happened, at least in part. I could see it in her eyes. That's all any of us can ask for, I said, pulling a chair up beside her. You're doing the right thing, taking it one step at a time. She nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the window. I just don't want to fail her, she said quietly. I could see the fear still there, buried deep, but it wasn't as overwhelming as before. She was trying to let go of the guilt, but it wasn't easy. You won't fail her, I said firmly. You're already doing everything you can. She needs you, and you're here for her. That's what matters. She looked at me, her expression softening. I'm trying, she whispered. I nodded. I know you are. And I'm here to help. We'll get through this together. She gave me a small, grateful smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It would take time, but I could see that she was starting to believe in herself again. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't think I could do this without you. The words stung, but not in the way I thought they would. There was no shame in her voice, no guilt, just raw, honest gratitude. It felt good to hear it, but it also made me realize just how much responsibility I had taken on. I wasn't just a part of their journey. I was a lifeline. You're welcome, I said. Softly. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. We sat there for a while, the quiet comfort of our shared understanding settling between us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But we were here. And that was enough for now. The road ahead was long, and we all knew it. But we were taking it one step at a time, together. And maybe that was enough. As I looked over at Lily, still asleep in the chair, I realized that I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to be here. And as long as I would keep showing up. For her mother, for both of them. I woke up the next morning, the quiet hum of the hospital room surrounding me. It was still early, but I had been awake for a while, thinking about everything that had happened and what the future might hold. It wasn't easy, but I had come to realize that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a series of steps, some small, some big, but all important. I looked over at Lily and her mother. They were both asleep, but I could see that things were different now. There was a sense of peace in the room that hadn't been there before. The uncertainty and fear were still there, but there was also something new, a glimmer of hope. The past few days had been a whirlwind, but it had also been a time of growth for all of us. We had all been through so much, but we had also found something in each other that we hadn't expected, the strength to move forward. I got up quietly, not wanting to disturb them, and went to the window. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the parking lot outside. It was a new day, and with it came new possibilities. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew that I couldn't leave them now. We had come this far together, and I wasn't about to turn away from it. As I stood there, lost in my thoughts, I heard a soft sound behind me. I turned to see Lily's mother awake, her eyes soft as she looked at me. She smiled faintly, the first real smile I had seen from her in days. Good morning, she said quietly. How are you feeling? I asked, walking over to her bedside. She nodded slowly, though I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Better. A little more at peace, I think. She paused, her gaze drifting to the window. I'm still scared. I still don't know what to do next, but I think I can handle it now. I think I can move forward. I sat down beside her, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't easy to get to this point. The past few days had been filled with uncertainty, guilt, and fear, but now, I could see something different in her eyes. There was a strength there, a quiet resilience that hadn't been there before. "You're doing great," I said softly. "You've made it through the hardest part. And you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone." She gave me a small, grateful smile. "I know. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." I shook my head. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what needs to be done." She looked at me for a moment, her eyes full of gratitude. "You've done more than that," she said quietly. "You've helped me see that I can keep going. You've made me believe in myself again." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't come into their lives looking for gratitude, but hearing it from her felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't just here for the moment. I was part of their future now. We all were. I turned my attention to Lily, who was slowly waking up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she blinked a few times before meeting my gaze. She smiled softly, and for the first time in a while, it seemed genuine. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," I replied, walking over to her. "How did you sleep?" She shrugged slightly, though her eyes seemed a little brighter than before. "Okay. I'm still a little scared, but I know Mom's going to be okay." I nodded. "She's going to be okay. You both are." Lily looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at me. "Thank you for saving her," she said quietly. Her words were simple, but they meant more than I could explain. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I'm just glad I could help." She smiled again, a little more brightly this time, and for the first time, I saw the weight in her eyes lift. It wasn't gone, but it was starting to fade. "I think I'm ready to go home," Lily said, her voice soft but steady. "I think we both are." I looked over at her mother, who nodded slowly. "I think we're ready too," she said, her voice stronger now. "We just need some time to figure things out, but we're going to be okay." I stood up, walking over to the window again. The world outside was still moving, still turning, but inside that room, there was something different now. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding. It was about hope. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would be long, but we had made it this far. And for the first time, I believed we could make it through the rest. I turned back to them, a small smile on my face. "I'll be here," I said. "Whatever you need, I'll be here." And I meant it, because in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about a promise. It was about the kind of bond that could never be broken, no matter what happened next. In this compelling tale inspired by real-life experiences, we dive into the world of one of the most intriguing and mysterious groups, the Hell Angels. As we follow the journey of a biker who finds himself in a life-altering situation, we explore the deep emotional complexities of two individuals who were nearly lost to the waters of a river. This story unfolds through moments of courage, guilt, and unspoken strength, offering a fresh perspective on the true meaning of loyalty and protection. Hell Angels stories like this one reveal the unexpected human connections formed in times of crisis and how the bonds formed during life's most challenging moments can be unbreakable. As the biker stays by the side of a mother and daughter, both struggling to heal after a traumatic experience, the story takes unexpected twists and reveals the profound impact that one person's choice can have on the future of others. Through this journey, we learn that strength is not just about surviving, but about moving forward, even when the past haunts you. Hell Angels stories often depict a world filled with danger and hardship, but this particular story shows that within the toughest exteriors, there lies a capacity for compassion and support. Join us as we follow these characters through their emotional recovery, showing how even in the darkest times, people can find the strength to rise again. With each step they take, they begin to heal, and with every word they speak, they understand more about their true resilience. Hell Angel stories are more than just about motorcycles and brotherhood. They are about the human experience, the raw emotions, and the choices we make that shape our destinies.